Hello, comic book fans. Here's Earl Grey. Oh, shit. I guess that's the first advice for today. Don't open your beer above your cherished comic books. Not a good idea. But anyway, anyhow, I'm determined to take my time today to show you basically one book, even though you can't see it already, but I have some hints spread out over the floor here. I want to talk about one artist that first popped up in the comic book world and for me in the Sandman Volume 1 with this very typically EC comic horror-y style. He didn't struck me as very original at that time. I liked the story, but the artist, I wasn't too crazy about him, to be honest with you. But his art grew on me with each reading, and Sandman, you know, it's a book that you read multiple times. I still think that it was a bit of a miscast to take him as the first artist for Sandman. In contradiction to Batman, that's a very good choice, I think, and so we talk today about Batman Secrets, gallery edition of some Batman stories written and drawn by Sam Kieth. So this gallery edition of Kelly Jones, I've just put it down here to show you that it's exactly the same size as the Sam Kieth book here. So you have an impression how big this book is. So let's put this aside and talk about this one here. Yeah, the cover alone is very nice. It's printed with some lacquer here. I have Joker here tenderly fondling Batman's face. It's story-wise, it's a theme throughout this book, almost through every page. It's Batman and Joker. And for those of you who aren't tired of that old pairing, this book has something to offer, I think. So, but after that beer attack, I really don't want to destroy here anything. Right off the bat, this book here convinced me more with the art than the stories. I've read it from cover to cover. It came yesterday with the mail, and today I've read it. Decent stories, but no Dark Knight Returns or The Killing Joke or Arkham Asylum. Even though, especially here, the first story arc borrows a lot from these three books, from Arkham Asylum, and Killing Joke is actually a lot referenced here, and Arkham Asylum, Dark Knight, and from Dark Knight Returns is this media angle, the media as a backdrop to all the action, and it rubs me a bit the wrong way today when the media here is portrayed as a compromised business, which it is maybe, but today we don't have anything else, I think, to protect us from some morons in the world. So, yeah, they did the same thing like in the other gallery editions. When there are two versions of one page, they built in these translucent papers. So we have here the first version, I think, of Sam Kieth, with this pretty experimental portrait of the Joker, and I think then editorial kicked in and said, oh, you have to do some explanations how we have to read the story, and then he did this, and yeah, these speech bubbles are filled with basically explanations how bad the Joker is, and etc., etc. I think this is a bit superfluous, but shows us how editorial can make comics more boring. But I'm thankful that they included it in here, so we can witness the process, how the editor, I think it was Scott Dunbier, had a saying in how the finished product should look like. We get a story-wise, we get a glimpse into the past of Bruce Wayne, and here's a nice homage to Will Eisner's Spirit, and it's not Spirit but Secrets, the title of the comic. And some pages are really fantastic. A lot of the pages are really fantastic, as you can see here. The art. Sam Kieth experiments a lot with spraying from a toothbrush or something like that, smearing the color, and we have a lot of these blue lines here, and manic scratching and cross-hatching, and on some pages we have some collages. This page here is not scanned from the original art. Story-wise, in case you don't know anything about Secrets, I didn't know about the story either, but yeah, Batman is framed for murder by the Joker, who's on parole, and yeah, some tropes you never have heard anything before. Yeah, maybe we're jaded because yeah, this is from the early 90s, so maybe then it was a bit newer, but yeah, the premises of the story here is really used and reused a lot of the times. Nevertheless, Sam Kieth manages to get something new out of it, and he experiments with his with tropes from other stories, like for instance The Killing Joke. In the foreword he writes that he liked the dialogue between Batman and Joker at the end of The Killing Joke. Who doesn't like this dialogue? And therefore he slipped these dialogues in the middle of his story. There are some dialogues between Batman and the Joker, and this is repeated over and over all the 5 issues of Secrets. Secrets is reproduced here in its entirety. The original art is scanned in its original size, yada yada. This includes the cover sketches, or rather cover painting, almost, with the original color from Sam Kieth. Sam Kieth wrote in the foreword that he deliberately chose a smaller sheet of paper to clear his game a bit up, to not to put too much detail into his page, but to sort of look for a clearer formula. And I think he succeeded with this page big time. And this is something else Sam Kieth does again and again over the run of the story here. He experiments with an old Xerox copy machine. That's no computer effect or something like that, but yeah, he puts it on the copy machine, on the Xerox, and while the machine was copying the page, he slipped the page downwards. You should do this too. It's really fun to experiment with some photos or something like that. It's really not very difficult. Yeah. So again, the story is pretty okay, I would say. But without the art of Sam Kieth, it would be very generic. But this art here is wow, and I think that's the purpose of these gallery editions, that we can marvel at the art, and the story takes back row, and in the front row and center is the art. He really goes wild with this expressionistic stuff here, and again some dialogue with Batman and the Joker. This looks almost like Richard Corbin drew this here. But it's again some stuff. Actually, this is a pity, because without it, it would be a double-page spread. On the right-hand side, we have just these abstract experimentations from Kieth, depicting a nightmare of Bruce. And here we have Bruce, supposedly from real photography. So I would really love to see it this way. But Scott Dunbier or whoever thought it would be necessary to put this cartoony explanatory piece onto on this page here. I think these Batman stories are somehow so familiar to the comic book community, to us readers, that it won't hurt if we weren't every time and each time told and spoon-fed all the basic premises, that Joker is an atrocious villain and that Bruce Wayne is Batman and stuff like that. We know that. Every child knows that, I guess. So yeah, just go with it and be a bit abstract. Play with the stuff, with formulas, with the narratives, and so on. And that's exactly what Sam Kieth did when editorial allowed him to do so. I think he painted here this part, I guess above photography, and then this is all collaged in, and we have here some experimentations, more collage. On this double-page spread there is no new drawing, I guess. Usually, maybe I think this is a bit sloppy, but hey, he's up to something here. So, and a lot of these colored pages, because are within the stories, because Keith always seems to think about the colors in which his art should be reproduced. And again, one crazy panel with Batman and Joker. And Secrets 3. Again, this is the original size of the art for the cover drawing for Secrets 3. I guess I should speed it up a little. Yeah, here this is the drawing for the cover, or the panel which they took for the cover. Again, yeah, some experiments with the Xerox copy machine. This is, again, something else. An usual double-page panel. But then we have on the bottom here some remarks or hints and commentaries. Shows us that Sam Kieth really thinks of the Batman mythos as some material for good art. And here more good art. Rocking the Xerox copy machine. Using again and again his same drawing of this journalist, old friend of Bruce Wayne. So, and I love this this portrait of the Joker, as I love this page actually. But here he seems to he looks a bit like a normal dude with this characteristic Keith eyebrows. Sam Kieth strikes me as the master of eyebrows when there's some particular feature. It's just this small drawing, but he looks normal and he doesn't, and that's really nice. And here we have some Keith coloring for Secrets 4. Xerox copy maniacisms, and yeah, Joker in an astronaut suit. The reveal at the end of Secrets 5, I think we have to go a bit farther here, isn't that big of a reveal. Maybe the whole arc is just in the terms of the story, one issue too long. Hey, you could tell this in 3 or maybe even 2 issues, but I wouldn't change it because of Sam Kieth's art, which is really amazing. So, right here, game over for good old Joker. Spoiler, spoiler. I guess you would have expected that. And some details like this face here with just some lines and all these sprayed paint over all. It looks, sometimes Keith's art looks a bit chaotic, to be honest, but he has a plan often. Even though he refers to his art with very poignant terms, I think his forward is like his art, a bit overflowing and a bit too stuffed, and not always to the point, up to the point. But here he is. Carl Jung, Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, mythology, psychology, all of those templates dovetailed into interesting stories. My way of dealing with them was to put them all in a blender, set it on high, and then forget to put the lid on so it would just splatter everywhere. Whatever splattered out would make an interesting surprise. So, a good way to describe his experimental approach to his stories. So maybe a bit onto the second story. We have the first issue of Confidential 40. Well, Confidential 40 is the first issue of a miniseries called Ghosts. So we don't get the whole story. It's interesting. It's an interesting premise, including a blind girl and for a change, not Joker. But I have the suspicion that Sam Kieth wrote himself into a corner, or painted himself into a corner here, because I don't know how the story can continue with and making still some sense. It's really a weird story with a supernatural ghost that's and Batman isn't too good anyway here. So I would be curious how this story will continue, but not too curious because I'm afraid that the story isn't that great. And Batman and Lobo 1 is, it's Batman and Lobo 1. What do you expect? It's pretty goofy, and that's interesting. The first panel in Wayne Manor, and Batman gets some psychological signals in his brain from a spaceship where he is summoned to, and whoever thought that this panel, somebody thought that this panel isn't sexy enough for the first panel in a story arc, so they put this lady here in, which signals these message into Batman's brain. And to be honest with you, it looks better with her, seriously. And then he is beamed up to the spaceship, and we have here some computer effects messing with or using Sam Kieth's art here. And I don't care for Lobo too much, but I'm an ignorant fool that way. Now, to be honest, I haven't read anything with Lobo yet. Maybe do some Lobo reading in the future. This page here is typical Sam Kieth in the way that he mixes up everything from cartoony to action painting, expressionistic art, to some lady and the screaming Lobo, and all is put in on one page. He's very much by himself in this story, where he just can go with all the freak-outisms and sci-fi motorbikes and strange stuff. Like he says in the foreword, he isn't maybe the best photorealistic artist, but we have enough of these guys who, and ladies who draw bar photos and forget a bit the task of the artist to create something out of it, something new. And that is definitely what Sam Kieth does. Even though I'm pretty certain that he used some photo references for that lady in front and maybe for Lobo in the back. Why not? But he does something with it, and he experiments he risks something. Even if that means to fail times on some pages to lose the story for the art. Sometimes I guess that's a criticism you can make sometimes, that the art is so overwhelming that the story is put a bit back. But as I mentioned it before, these stories here are all about the art for me, and the art is telling the story, and that's always a bit difficult to explain. That when I try to decipher good comic art, then I build a story in my head in that time, and that adds up to the obvious plot that this guy shoots that guy or something like that. But then there are these extreme guns, and it's all part of the story, and the scantily clothing of this cartoon Barbarella here obviously does its own part for the story. So maybe should wrap things up here a bit. There's a story from 2015. Most of the stuff which I've shown you here is from the early 90s, but this here is from Batman 38 or something. Let's check. Yeah, Batman 38. Just a few pages. I don't get too much out of it, but it's good to know that Sam Kieth is still around and kicking butts. So, and here we have covers and art for different Batman comics. This here, Scratch. Yeah, and I like it that you can see here these blue lines and how he developed the drawing from ground on. And even this picture here of the Joker, I like it, I love it. But here he writes some self-criticism. Strange growth that it doesn't even look like a cheek. Okay, if you look closely at this cheek here, he has some point, but overall this is a great picture from the Joker. And yeah, in the back we have even some stuff. That's Wonder Woman. Yeah, here, Through the Looking Glass. That's a weird book, by the way, but I think that's the written by Bruce Jones and drawn by Sam Kieth, of course. Crazy mashup. Here we have that character. Even though I don't think that she's really addressed as Wonder Woman in the story. A weird mashup of Alice in Wonderland and Batman. But I think for wrapping up purposes, I give you just a glimpse on some of these pages, and we are at the end of it. So folks, that was all for now. And don't drop any beer on your comics. My last advice for you. Yeah. Cheers. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.